Welcome, Blue Believers, to another episode of the Stamford Sync, where we are syncing up with everything Chelsea FC. And welcome to my 6th episode of my new podcast series, It's Time to Talk About. I am delighted today to be joined by Nina Hristova from Nina's Chelsea Corner. You've seen her on YouTube, you've seen her on Chelsea Fan TV, and you might even have seen her on Sky Sports. Today, we're going to talk about the model, the transfer strategy, and ostensibly the kids, right? But before we get into it, Nina, mate, how are you doing?
I'm good, mate. Thank you for having me on again. It's been nice to take a break from Chelsea and actually just focus on other things in life because you don't realise how much your football club controls the way you feel. So it's nice to take a break. I think it's come at a good time. And I normally don't enjoy international break, and even though England haven't been particularly entertaining, I've still preferred that over watching Chelsea. So yeah, but obviously we're right back into it now with all the news and everything that's popping up ahead of our FA Cup game. So yeah, we're right back to it.
It's interesting. I've done a couple of these now, and basically everyone has said the same thing, where it's like, normally I don't look forward to international breaks, but right now I've been really looking forward to it. And the first week or whatever was fine, but then obviously we wake up today and there's the news about Marco Correa, which, you know, is going to play a little bit of part in what we're going to talk about today. And Enzo Fernandez obviously reaffirming his desire to leave for pastures white in Spain as well. So we're going to talk about the model, right? We're just going to break it down a little bit. So since BlueCo took over, we are now looking at, instead of buying players to try and get us instant results on the pitch, we are looking at young players with high potential, lots of sell-on value, right? It's a business-first approach, and, you know, it's largely seems to be driven by the Clear Lake side of BlueCo as well, rather than like the whole thing, because when, you know, Todd Boehly came in, he was very much, let's get Sterling and Koulibaly, and I want to see Cristiano Ronaldo here, and stuff like that. So, you know, and obviously now we've got the sporting directors, and Egbali in particular, leading the charge. So I've got some interesting stats and figures just to look at Chelsea's trading madness over the last 4 years. But before we get into it, just talk to me about the model, how you feel about it, and if you genuinely think there's any chance of it bearing fruit at some point in the future.
Yeah, I think it's very flawed. And I think ultimately we're now at a point where we realise it was all quite experimental and it was something that's never been done before and it's never been evident of it prospering anywhere else, especially in the Premier League. So I think we're now at a point where, because I'd say towards the start, I was quite excited at the prospects, you know, signing these young talented players, beating sort of other teams to them. You know, you look at Esteval, who's perhaps mostly the prime example and at the forefront of that. But also with the amount of players we have bought in that sort of category and age group, it's almost like about maybe 1 in 6 or 7 will actually come good consistently. So yeah, I think we're now at a point where everybody's quite frustrated and sort of, you know, directing their frustrations to the ownership because ultimately that's sort of where it all comes down to. And we've wanted the model to change now for quite some time, but there's no indication that it really will. So unfortunately, yeah, we're in a position now where we're not succeeding with this model. So it feels very doom and gloom.
Yeah, it does feel like to me that this summer is really indicative, because the problem I find with the rhetoric about what we're talking about at the moment in general is it is obvious now from a fan's perspective over the course of the season that this model is not bearing fruit. But the only opportunity to change that is essentially twice a year, but really once a year. The summer transfer window is the opportunity, isn't it? So do you think after everything we've seen this season, like including Enzo Maresca leaving and obviously the abject nature of the performances recently, you know, the players like Marco Correa coming out and being like, we are lacking experience in the squad and that is why we are struggling to go toe to toe with the likes of PSG, do you think that the sporting directors in any world can really look at this and say, yeah, this model's working and we're just going to keep on doing it? Or like, because it's just got to change, isn't it? From a, you know, we're a data-led consortium, you know, the sporting directors are all about facts on sheets, and the facts are we lost 8-2 against PSG and just made Everton look like Real Madrid. So what do you think, like, about this summer coming?
Yeah, to be honest, it's difficult to feel optimistic about the summer as well. You know, a lot of people say we need Champions League football in order to have that law to I guess, attract high profile players and experienced players. But we know that's not how we operate. And we've already seen it in a couple of transfer windows, as you've said. And we've almost given them the benefit of the doubt and said, perhaps we will go and sign some experience. And Kukurea obviously alluded to how important that is. And he is arguably one of very few experienced players we do have in the side. You know, he's a Euros winner. He's 27. He's sort of been around now and he's played at a very high level. So he almost misses other Kukureas in the team, right? So it's like, how on earth can so many young players learn on the go, sort of, it's almost like trial and error, you're hot and cold game in, game out. But where are those sort of leaders that can tie them in? And like you had Thiago Silva to do with some of the defenders that we brought in. You know, I always go back to that example because that is evidence of having a very experienced player there. Forget the footballing abilities, because we know Thiago Silva was absolutely exceptional in his position at what he did. But it's more than that, right? It's the leadership. It's when you're losing, you've got that player at the back that's vocal, that's, you know, telling you not to go and argue with the referee at every decision that goes your way, but actually just focus and pulling your socks up and going out there and playing your game. And you see that there's so much signs of inexperience through the red cards, the yellow cards, the way that we have like handled ourselves on the pitch, the attitude, and all that just does come from inexperience. And you go back to like your Mikhailo Mudryks as well, like those sort of players that we kind of like sign at the start, because I think Mudryk was supposed to be at the forefront of what this project kind of really was, you know, signing a young, exactly, a poster boy precisely. So I think, and obviously that failed miserably for many other reasons, but even when he was playing for us regularly, he was hot and cold. He wasn't a polished player. And I think that the fact that we're trying to go and challenge for a Premier League title with a team that have maybe had a season at best playing senior football before arriving at Chelsea, perhaps have had a short spell at a top club for maybe half a season, weren't even regular starters, and all of those kind of coming together, how on earth could you possibly think that we can go on and challenge for a title? So it almost seems so simple, right? Just bringing in some experience. Like I sound like a broken record, but it does go a long way. And look back at all of the Premier League winning teams in the past. I don't think we could see a squad like this that has gone on won the Premier Leagues. So it is flawed and it's ultimately not designed to succeed. And I hope that they can see that. But again, there is really no indication of that being the case.
It's wild, isn't it? I was talking to Mason from Blues and Stripes yesterday. We had a big chat about the goalkeepers and stuff, and it's like, you know, even in the goalkeeper situation, like we're seeing something that basically has never been proven to work before, where we've got a young backup goalkeeper in Philip Jorgensen who is not good enough and he's supposed to develop and stuff, and it's just like that. And obviously there are just examples like that all over the squad at the moment, aren't they? It's just wild, man. Like you said, I think we all sound like a broken record, because as fans who have been watching football for a long time, it's like you look at the squad and you're just like, yeah, okay, Esteval looks great, Cole Palmer on his best day, absolutely fantastic. There are young talents in there like Yoro Hato who look like they could develop into good players in the future. But as you kind of said, and you know, it's interesting you brought up Thiago Silva, because I spoke with Charlie about that as well. He said something I think it was really pointed, is like Thiago Silva would still be starting now. Do you know what I mean? If he was in the squad, like he'd still be starting now at 40 years old. Do you know what I mean? And we really miss a trick.
Premier League teams would take him as a starter in their back line.
So and you know, you're spot on about all of it. The problem is at the moment that even if they came out and said, we're going to buy some experience in the summer, you know what happens then? Everyone goes, oh, it's PR. So it doesn't even really matter at the moment, does it? Like, unfortunately, whether there's indication or not, it can't be judged fairly. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's just going to be one of those where we go into the summer. I have a feeling, and this is hopium and copium, because before anything, I'm a Chelsea fan and I just want to see us do well. I have a feeling that, you know, I think about some of the players that we've looked at over the last, you know, however long. Mike Maignan, there was some desire to find an experienced player in that respect, you know, for the short term. Obviously, we ended up giving Robert Sanchez the chance. That's not turned out to be good. There were conversations about Mark Guehi and Semenyo, although I believe much more that they rejected us. Do you know what I mean? I think that, you know, I don't think, you know, people were like, why didn't we just spend the money on Mark Guehi? I'm like, it doesn't matter if he doesn't want to come at the end of the day. So I do think that there is something there, especially with, I forget his name, but we got that guy from Liverpool, the guy who signed like Mo Salah and, do you know what I mean, a lot of the kind of like low cost, low risk, but, you know, they had high potential players that were a little bit older and stuff as well. David Fallows, I think it is, the guy that came in from Liverpool. So I do have a desperate hope that somewhere in the summer there is some sort of desire to go, and even and it feels ridiculous saying it, but Tosin Adarabi-Yo, although he's turned out to be terrible, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that it's planned out well, but at the same time, we brought a 27, nearly 28-year-old who had Premier League experience into the squad in hope of putting some of that experience in. So there is a small part of me that thinks maybe, just because I can't bring myself to completely give up on my club. But what is damning is what I'm gonna get into a little bit now, and I'd love to know what you think. So I've brought up we're not going to go through them all, but I've brought up the entire list of players that Chelsea have signed since BlueCo have taken over.
Nice.
And there are 50 plus players in total. Right, 50 plus players in
Does that include like players out on loan as well right now?
Yeah, every single one. That's, and the only one it's not including is current pre-contract agreement players like Omega and Quenda and stuff like that. But we are edging towards 60. We're not very far off at all from having purchased 60 players in the last 4 years. And that's, technically 8 transfer windows, but it's not, because there was one January we didn't buy anyone, and this January obviously we didn't go in either. Of that 50 players, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 players arguably are either of first team quality or looks like they still could be. So those players are, out of the 50 players that we've bought, Marc Cucurella, he was 24 when we bought him, he's 27 now. Malo Gusto, I've put a little question mark next to, because I think he's a good squad player. I don't think he should be getting near the first team nearly as much as he is, but okay, and he's only 22, do you know what I mean? So that one's gone okay. Enzo Fernandez, 21 when we bought him, 25 now. Cole Palmer, Moises Caicedo, Pedro Neto again, another question mark. Esteval Willian and João Pedro. So of those 8 players, 6 of them really, do you know what I mean? So we're looking at only just over a 10% success ratio with buying players over the last 4 years. All of those players were under 25. I think Marc Cucurella and Pedro Neto were 24, so they're the only ones that were a little bit older. But of this incredible list of nearly 60 players, we're looking at like 10% success rate. How does that make you feel as a Chelsea fan?
Well, it just really reinforces everything that we've been pretty frustrated about, right? Yeah, gosh, to be fair, when you put it that way, it really does. It does make you feel even more despair, but it is quite telling, isn't it, then, just how things have gone. And out of all those you've named, half of them potentially could be moving away from Chelsea now. So that's also a big cause for concern, and it makes you feel even more doomed, because what happens if like Cucurella and Enzo go? Because are you going to replace them? And I know that they, particularly Enzo Fernandez, is one that divides opinion a lot in the fan base. So again, there's some that rate him more than others, but I would still argue that what he has done alongside Caicedo as a duo has been pretty much part of our most successful moments as Chelsea in the last kind of couple of years. Would you agree? Like the duo has been very solid, and they've pretty much played like all available minutes to them. So like Enzo out of that, who are you like signing that's even better, right? Because that's the concern, isn't it? And Cucurella, how do you replace Cucurella? Like, do you know what I mean? We brought in Yoel Hato to be an understudy, but I'd argue the disparity between a Cucurella and Hato is from here to the sky. So
massive.
Again, like, is that who you're looking to potentially take that left back role as number one and be solid game in, game out, when he struggles to even have a solid 90 minutes at the moment, and we've not seen that from him. So yeah, it is real concerning, and it often goes back, and I use like Liverpool as a really good example of that, is how seamless their transition was from like Klopp to Slot, because they had the backbone of a very like world-class goalkeeper, like a very good left back, a very good right back, a midfielder that's been around, a Mo Salah, so they've got that solid backbone, and then all of the like youngsters and the academy players that kind of came through the ranks under Klopp. It was such a perfect kind of blend to have that quality, and they could afford the youngsters to make mistakes occasionally, right? Because you had those players that are so solid at the back. So It's a real shame that we don't have that, and we envisioned it to be, with Cucurella, potentially with Reece James, with Enzo, with Caicedo. We obviously need a goalkeeper and a centre-back pairing that's going to be solid, and you'd argue Cole is potentially one of those two.
Yeah.
But, in the attacking department, potentially, obviously Cole Palmer, like you mentioned, potentially Joao Pedro Nesteval. But now you take a couple or even three of those players out, and it's like you're back at square one when you weren't even in a good
Yeah.
position to begin with, right? And these days it's so difficult because you just about have a starting 11 that you're hoping can see out a full 90 minutes, and they can't even be consistent. Let's not even talk about our bench, because you mentioned how many players we've bought, and our bench has
The
been
bench.
just beyond shocking,
Tragic.
So
Yeah.
it is real concerning. It's like you're buying and buying and buying, but where is this ambition like translating on the pitch? Like, where is it actually coming together? Because you'd argue we still want to go out and spend and spend. And of course, we're a laughing stock. Oh, haha, Chelsea spent $1 billion and here we are. We want more players and we want to. And it is true. And it's just, it makes you feel like, well, what is the direction? And how is this prosperous? And it's going to be like another turnover, another big overhaul in players, not replacing anybody even remotely. And how do you get players on boards now anyway? Because if our players want out that have currently been here for a while, then how is this project attractive to anybody else coming in? Unless you are a 19, 20-year-old who's just, keen to play for Chelsea anyway. And it's such an
Yeah, of course.
amazing prospect. But let's be real, to a 25, 6, 7-year-old who's maybe had the chance to play in the Champions League, has had a go at like potentially winning a domestic title, they're not going to be interested in this project. Not at all.
We've seen that already, like I mentioned before, with Guehi and Semenyo.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, those are the type of quality, even though Semenyo, 23, 24?
Yeah.
He comes in and upgrades your first 11,
Absolutely,
without question. Do you know what I mean? Guehi comes in and completely upgrades your first 11, and Man City getting both of those players was indicative of the difference, the gulf in, not even just quality of the teams, but just, direction of the football club. I have an interesting question, because obviously we're talking a lot about Enzo Fernandez and Marc Cucurella at the moment, and because they are the guys that are coming out with, they've got stuff to say. Do you know what I mean? They've got stuff to say. And, so one thing I find interesting, and obviously the narrative at the moment is Enzo Fernandez pushing for a move to Real Madrid, and Marc Cucurella is flirting with Barcelona, and he's come out with a lot of pointed words about the ownership and this, that and the other. So one thing I find interesting is that before this started happening, two things that I think were really important that did happen that we're not really talking about at the moment is Reece James signed a 6-year deal. Reece James, arguably, proper Chelsea or not, one of the best defenders in the world, and upgrades almost any team, right? So that he had enough confidence, and I don't necessarily think it was just the Chelsea connection, because it reminds me of Trent Alexander-Arnold is the most Liverpool guy ever, and he finds his way to Real Madrid because he wants to take a step in his career. Do you know what I mean? So I think there's something in that. Moises Caicedo also as well recently coming out and saying that he wants to be a club legend. So Moises Caicedo recently got a new deal. Reece James has got a new deal. Is there a chance? And I'm not saying I disagree with what Enzo and Cucurella are saying. It's 100% true. Of course it is. But do you think that this is potentially a way of them trying to agitate for improved contract terms? Or do you genuinely think it is just like they have got one eye out of the door?
Yeah. It's the second thing for sure. And it's like usually, you want to be selfish with your players and keep your best and want them to be and become club legends. But I think the moment we are now is so different from where we were, like 5 and 6 and 7 years ago, with wanting to keep these players, because we want them to do well, go live your best life, go play for Real Madrid and Barcelona. At this point, it's like, where is the indication that you're going to actually win something massive in the next few years? And you can't say they didn't try, and you can't say they didn't put their effort and pour their heart out into this, because again, like Cucurella and Enzo, because obviously they're the two players right now with the most talking points around them, they, it's undeniable that they've had passion, and probably one of the few kind of players who are very vocal. They will absolutely give it their everything, like pat badge, whatever, those things that kind of make you happy as a fan to see. And again, say what you will, Enzo Fernandez has had his moments, but also he has been one of the more, I guess, passionate voices, and he is the vice captain. And you can't say that he hasn't tried. And I think they're at a point, where both of them have won pretty significant trophies with their countries, right?
I was going to say that. I think that's a really important part of this as well.
Yeah. And they would want to dream of a Champions League or a domestic title as well. So it's like you can't really blame them. And they're both in arguably like their prime year as well. And it's like if you stick around for another 2, 3, 4 years at Chelsea, that's a very different talking point there, because then the Madrid and the Barcelona ship sails at that point.
Yeah,
So
100%.
you have to take that into consideration. And they don't believe. And that's a problem. So it's like, gone are the days where we are going to build affinities with players who are like proper Chelsea and want to do that. And Cole Palmer as well. I always say Cole Palmer's not a player who's interested in becoming a club legend with a club. He would much rather be the player that has gone and played for every single top club and made his mark, because he absolutely has the potential to do that. And of course, like, he's enjoyed being a superstar here. He got exactly what he wanted, like becoming kind of the main character, which he wouldn't have been at City in the time that he was still there. So for Cole Palmer, it's like he knows that he can go out there and be a top player at another club elsewhere. And it's like he's had his moments, but Cole Palmer is a player that deserves to win trophies and be at the top level, right?
Yeah, of course.
So
I think it's really difficult with Cole Palmer in particular, because one thing I think we are going to see this summer is this is the first time that the long contract model is going to be really, really tested, right? Because I've had a lot of conversations with Chelsea fans across the season, and there's a large consensus that, for instance, if Cole Palmer wants to go, he goes, and no contract keeps him. But just looking at the realism of that, he's signed recently until 2032. Do you know what I mean? It's like he's still got another 6 years on his contract. So BlueCo don't sell him for anything less than what they want to. Do you know what I mean? And I think minimum, that's like 120 mil. I think it's at the very least, a British transfer record, isn't it? Like Alexander Isak currently is 125. That's the British transfer record. I don't think Cole Palmer goes at all unless someone breaks the British transfer record for him. So I think, how many teams can do that? Like at the moment, it's the question. Like, obviously Man United's the big question, but they still need a big squad rebuild. And do they spend 130 mil of their entire squad rebuild on Cole Palmer?
No.
I've got a feeling no. And also, don't get me wrong, they're doing really, really well at the moment, but they don't know who the manager's going to be next season. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, I think there's so much that goes into that. With Enzo Fernandez, it's a bit different, because I could see a Real Madrid coming in with 100 mil for Enzo Fernandez. I don't think that's particularly unlikely, because they do like a Galactico every now and again. I think he fits the model. I think he's got, they're a player first team, and Enzo Fernandez has got a lot of really good qualities that I think would, do well over there. And Marc Cucurella has only got 2 years left on his deal. So Marc Cucurella is in the biggest danger of, he can agitate for a move. Do you know what I mean? But I don't think Enzo Fernandez can really agitate for a move, because he can't wait out his contract, because he'll be 30 nearly. Do you know what I mean? If he waits out his contract and goes on a free, he'll nearly be 30. So I think with Enzo Fernandez, he's got like 2 years until he can really push for that move. With Cole Palmer, I think it's even more complicated. What I do think is that any player that gets the right offer will be sold at the end of the day. I don't think there's a single player in our squad like that is kind of immune from being bought. And we hear this term untouchables quite a lot, don't we? And the truth is, like, I just don't think that actually is a real thing. I think maybe aside from Esteval Willian, but I think if someone came in with 100 mil for Esteval Willian, we'd probably sell him. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it's a really difficult one, man. And it's like, the problem is, kind of like you said before, if these players go, who comes in? And Enzo Fernandez in particular, I think, is a really interesting one, because so you've mentioned how polarizing he is in the fan base and stuff. Like, I am totally on the fence with Enzo Fernandez. Like, I'd be super happy to keep him, but I wouldn't be devastated if he left. And the reason for that is I don't think he's ever, like, you mentioned the Moises Caicedo-Enzo Fernandez partnership, the midfield partnership that works a lot. I think Enzo Fernandez suffers from positional identity crisis a little bit. Do you know what I mean? It's like really difficult to know what he is, where he is, and how to get the best out of him. I think the reason that partnership worked under Enzo Maresca is because we were favouring the inverted fullback, who basically ended up partnering, as a Malagusto or a Reece James that ends up partnering Moises Caicedo in midfield, which allows Enzo Fernandez to get forward. But under Liam Rosenior, we're not seeing that, and Enzo Fernandez has become the de facto number 10. is Enzo Fernandez a number 10? Like, I don't think so, really. Do you know what I mean? So, like I say, it's amazing to have a player of his qualities around the squad, and he can turn up in a moment and win a game. Do you know what I mean? And he's got the character, the personality. He's probably one of the bigger leadership kind of, characters we've got in the dressing room as well. But I do, I kind of sit on the fence with it. So I think, you look at all of the other midfielders that we've got. Andre Santos, Romeo Lavia, Dario Asugo. I'm not saying any of them are the quality to replace him, but I think if you look at them in terms of profile, that is the kind of guy that we would replace Enzo Fernandez with, I think. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I hear you on that. And to be fair, I do agree about the whole positional gambling thing with Enzo Fernandez. I think he has a bit of an identity crisis, particularly in the last kind of year or so. But I think equally though, in those sort of advanced positions, it has at times worked as well. I mean, Enzo Fernandez has scored quite a lot of our goals as well, I think, and assists as well up there. Yeah. So he's become more of a creator. Sort of crashes into the box at times. He can take penalties as well. So in terms of output, I think Enzo Fernandez has actually been quite good at that. I think for me, for sure. The bigger problem, and you mentioned Lavia and Asugo there. It's Asugo on paper is a player that we're supposed to be quite excited about, right? But again, haven't really seen him at all. Lavia at this point, does Lavia even play for Chelsea? Because I forget that he does. And in my head, he's a new signing, but he's not. He's been around for 3 or so years now, as you say, and it's the big what if. So I do understand the whole we shouldn't be turning away from moving players on, because there's the argument, who do you replace them with? It's not a good enough example. But I think it's just the bigger concern is that these were kind of meant to be the backbone players of this project, and you're basically moving them on one way or another just does reinforce that you've kind of even let that go as well. And it's almost like you've kind of gone away from your own vision, essentially, because this is what we were buying into, right? So yeah, it is really, really difficult. I don't really know what sort of what fee is right either. I think with some of these players, you're obviously going to have to cut your losses, but I think with profit purposes, you are going to generate money, and I think that is exactly the kind of tick moment once you do move Cole Palmer on for whatever fee that is in the 100 or so millions. Tick, Enzo Fernandez, tick, Cucurella. If you move him on now, you could potentially still be looking at a similar price tag in terms of what you pay for him. But if it's in 3 years' time, that's not the case. Do you know what I mean? So that those factors also do come into consideration. But it's sad that this is the thinking behind it, right? It's not like footballing. It's not like footballing justification. It's financial justification, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's a weird one, isn't it? Because like you say, with if we keep Cucurella for another 3 years, there's no opportunity to make profit on it at that point. It seems like we've kind of got the reverse policy to Man City, who spend big on players but are happy to let them go for kind of whatever. Man City don't make a huge amount of their money from player sales, do they? And obviously that we're just completely about player sales. One of the most impressive things that BlueCo have done in 4 years was come out of the last summer transfer window in profit from player trades. Do you know what I mean?
And we all did great to that, right? We were all quite impressed with actually that whole strategy.
Absolutely. But it's damning because it's not about football.
No,
in the grand scheme of things. And this is a conversation that I've had with a few of my friends recently. One of the hardest things I think about being a Chelsea fan that I don't really see the same amount of from other fan bases is the level of financial jargon we now need to be able to understand to support our football club. And we ask people, if you're a Brentford fan, you're talking about the players, the manager, the tactics, and the football, and that's kind of mostly where it starts and ends, with a little bit about transfers and ownership and stuff. But with us Chelsea fans, we're just spending all of this time at the moment talking about models and financial structures and holding companies, and do you know what I mean, all of this stuff at the moment. And it's one of the things that I think is really difficult with the model that we're talking about in general. Is not even just about how it affects the team. It's affected us as fans. Do you know what I mean? I think we're the only fans in the Premier League that spend as much time talking about transfer strategies, holding companies and financial models as anyone else. It's bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I was never good at maths or finance in school, but I've learned a lot in the last kind of couple years, financial education for you. But yeah, look, I think we've spoken a lot about like the owners being good businessmen, right? And I think that's ultimately the tag that they get, good
Yeah.
businessmen. But when it comes to like the footballing side of things, nobody really had a clue arriving and taking over and trying to create what's never been done before. It's almost like you've not seen evidence of it. It hasn't prospered anywhere else. Fine, you want to try and error a club that's won and been so successful and strip everything that it has stood for. And when people say like, well, we want our old Chelsea back, I say to that, the whole point is that they wanted to get rid of the old Chelsea. They wanted to create a new Chelsea, and this is ultimately what that looks like. And obviously us as fans, because we've been around since, the beginning of time when we've all started supporting the club, like we hold different like values, and we have this certain picture of the club that we still hold the club to. But that's a flaw, because it's not what it's supposed to be anymore. It's not what they want it to be anymore. So I literally say they got rid of everybody like under Rome, and they got rid of everyone in the backroom stuff. I'm talking like even to like retail staff. I'm talking to every single person that like the groundsman, like absolutely every single person that was there before, because they wanted to do things their own way, and this is how they're doing things their own way. So it's like I don't want to say to people accept that we're never going to be like great again, but accept that this is what they wanted. They did want to strip the old Chelsea and build something that they thought might be successful in one way or another. But I think that success doesn't align with the success that we as fans envision, because they told us that we'd be challenging and winning trophies, and they obviously told the players that when they first came in, but there is just no sign that and we are regressing. I said this to Charlie earlier when we were discussing it, that we are in a position now when we were in last season and the season before where we're trying to figure out if we can make Champions League football, and we're trying to kind of hang in there just to qualify for a competition that we've been out of, right? We are 22 points off Arsenal. Last year we were closer to the Premier League leaders, I think, at this point.
I think
so. It's
so.
like, where are the signs that we are progressing? And it is paper over the cracks. And to be honest, like, to answer your question earlier about the players sort of like, are they good at like being consistent throughout the season? No, but they are good enough for the one-off game, and I think that's where we've maybe that's maybe where we've been fooled a little bit. And again, I am absolutely a culprit of that, getting lifted by certain games in isolation where you get sold a dream of what it could be. But that's it. It's the players are good enough to be good enough in one-off games occasionally, but throughout a course of a whole season with the resources we have and the lack of leaders and experience, you're not going to make it through a 38 Premier League game season at the same level and manage to like hold out and see it through. It just can't happen.
I think part of the issue with the model as well is it's impossible not to as well, and we end up hoping and relying far too much on the likes of a Cole Palmer to come back from injury and turn things around, and an Esteval Willian to, this is his first year in the UK at this kind of level, and we put so much pressure on, like, everyone wants to see Esteval back in the squad at the moment because and now we're pinning our hopes on an 18-year-old kid because he's, whereas in truth how players normally develop well, young players, is surrounded by that experience and that quality that holds the rest of the team together. But now we're like putting all of this pressure on these. I mean, Cole Palmer's 23, Esteval's 18, João Pedro's still only 23 as well. Do you know what I mean? And we're putting all of this pressure on these guys to win us these games and stuff for us. And I think that is ultimately making it more difficult as well because, Cole Palmer and João Pedro and Esteval Willian could have an amazing game, but it doesn't matter because Rob Sanchez is going to put one in the back of his own net and he's supposed to be the experienced one. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I do, the whole thing is just wild, man. The whole thing is just absolutely wild. One thing I want to go back to that you mentioned before, I think is really interesting, about what people are saying about, like, we want our Chelsea back. I think that's a really bitter pill to swallow, in the Roman Abramovich method or model, whatever you want to call it, doesn't work anymore. Do you know what I mean? You can't really do it now, in terms of, like, buy in the best players and throw in the max amount of money as you can, because we're seeing things like PSR, and we have obviously gotten off scot-free with our charges and stuff, but Man City are talking about like 60-point deduction potentially being relegated. Tottenham have been throwing money at their team for ages and they are looking like they're getting relegated. Man United have been throwing serious amounts of cash. Like obviously, we look at BlueCo in isolation for the last 4 years, but Man United have been doing this for 10 years and have been really, really, really inconsistent and stuff. So I think the problem with that is like we were never going to be able to go back to that old model, and there's very few examples of it working. I think you even look at City at the moment. City obviously did it for a long time, but you look at their squad now and it's loads of youngsters. Do you know what I mean? It's just loads of youngsters. Arsenal are, they've kind of managed to do it, but they've been consistent and built over a long period of time.
And they were allowed to fail as well, like under the manager. I think it's a really big thing, and stability with a coach is so important and it's so overlooked. And we've been at the forefront of it. Like, I just don't see how, and obviously Cucurella and Enzo Fernandez and all the other players that have said they were shocked at the move, because again, it's like they were used to working under Maresca, and I guess, I don't know, none of us could have said whether Maresca would have been good enough to win a Premier League title. A lot of people said no, he's not, but equally just to have that foundation of already getting to know the players and doing what he can in one-off games. I don't know if he could have again succeeded with the squad, and in the long run certainly was flawed in many aspects of his coaching as well. Like nobody's disputing that, but like, did we really upgrade? No, you just caused another change and another basically pierced another hole in the ship and just sunk us even further, because it's another, I guess, big turnover that the players have to deal with, adapt to a new coach that ultimately I don't really even think that, it's no personal thing to Liam Rosini. I'm sure he's a lovely guy, but as a coach, so out of his depth, and you can't argue that. But where has he been before, let alone at a big club like Chelsea of this much magnitude with this much going wrong? But you're going to lose the players. So us fans, like, we've been kind of lost now for a little bit of some time, but you've got your players feeling it and thinking it and certainly discussing it in camp. Like, how do you expect them to turn up next week in the Premier League and feel so filled with confidence and go out and play? It's like, just down in confidence.
I do find it a really interesting conversation about the manager stuff, because one of the the accusations that is rightly levied at Liam Rosini a lot of the time is like, where's he come from, what's he done and stuff, and then it's like, but Mikel Arteta had never had a job before he went to Arsenal. He'd been an assistant manager at Man City, and don't get me wrong, that's an amazing experience, but in terms of like taking the team himself, he hadn't done it. Enzo Maresca, like you said, there's definitely a polarising mix of opinions about Enzo Maresca. And he won a trophy, won the championship with Leicester, with what was essentially still a Premier League team. Do you know what I mean? So I do think that's unusual, because I think you only got to look at like the likes of Arne Slot, who again did a good job at Feyenoord, but ultimately didn't have a massive experience to come and win the Premier League when he did. I think you got Xabi Alonso doing an invincible double in Germany, do you know what I mean, without having that huge amount of experience as well. I think we are just moving into this world where these are the kind of managers that we're going to get across the board now. These winners who are winning everything everywhere just don't really exist anymore, do you know what I mean? So
you're right, there aren't any high profile managers out there available right now, to be honest.
No, there's basically 3 in world football. It's like Hansi Flick, Luis Enrique and Pep Guardiola, and that's kind of it. In the grand scheme of things. So I think it's one of those, like, we look at Liam Rosini and we say like it's like a lot of content creators have been like, oh, it's a really undeserved appointment, and I'm like, well, I don't disagree with that in context, but I'm also like, who is not an undeserved appointment at this point? And forget the model, forget anything. Like I say, you got to look at Liverpool going from Klopp to Arne Slot. Was that a deserved appointment? Not necessarily, when you think about like, the level, and he came in to do okay. And, I think the manager conversation is really, really complicated, and I think it's going to get more complicated for clubs in general.
Yeah, you've got De Zerbi going to Tottenham now as well, so that's just the indication of what's going around, and I'm sure maybe we'll have a De Zerbi at some point down the line, who knows?
Yeah.
Actually, he won't get on with our owners.
No. My pick before we got Liam Rosenior was Fabregas. I've been following Fabregas at Como for the last 2 seasons, and he's just been absolutely phenomenal. But yeah, I think we've gotten away from the model a little bit, but this is just what happens, isn't it? This is just what happens. That all these things are all so interconnected, and I think the point in there is like there isn't one fix at the moment.
No.
I think there are so many holes in the boat. Do you know what I mean, that you were talking about before? We've punched so many holes in this ship that we could have a great transfer season, but the question remains, transfer window, sorry, but the question remains, is Liam Rosenior going to be good enough in order to bring that team together? We could get a new manager. Do you know what I mean? But then are the transfers going to work for that manager? And we could change the sporting directors, but if the manager and the players underneath them already, do you know what I mean? It's just like it
goes such on and on and on. Wow. No
cool.
hope.
But yeah. I'll tell you what. Yeah. I'm just going. Do you know what? I've been invited to be an official PSG fan by a content creator friend of mine. I'm debating it. But just to wrap up, PSG is a really, really good example of what our model should look like, because PSG are doing something very similar to what we are doing. They are buying young players.
They started at the same time as well.
Yeah, and they're putting them on long contracts. They are backing, but the difference is, the two major differences, which is what I think we need to look at long term. One is difficult. They got an experienced winning manager. Luis Enrique at Barcelona was incredible. Do you know what I mean? So that was obviously a really good shout, and they allowed him to play his football in his system. But the other thing is they've got experienced players. They still got Marquinhos at centre back, and a couple of things like that. They've got a young midfield, they've got young attackers, but their defense and stuff, there is experience dotted throughout that. So I think it's
that
even
back
more
line
annoying.
alone, sorry to interrupt you, but their back line alone allows your youngsters to make half as many mistakes as they will up front, because that it's so difficult to get past them. And yes, they have been a little bit more exposed and vulnerable, but still it goes without saying that is what you do with the defense. Like, that is how you operate.
I think it's pointed because PSG, obviously most Chelsea fans' knowledge of PSG is we just got battered by them 8-2. But the truth of the fact is PSG are not having a good season. Do you know what I mean? They are, by their own standards, not performing amazingly as well. And they're, a lot of the PSG fans can see upgrades and stuff and things that they need to change at the moment. And even with that, we still got absolutely plastered by them, because, so for me, like, looking at PSG, if we're going to talk about the model and what it should look like, I think PSG is kind of it. Do you know what I mean? I think PSG is a really good representation of what our model should look like, but because they don't go quite as heavy on the player trading in general as we do, but obviously they are also a very wealthy club. So that's the model. That's where we are. It's all a bit of a nightmare, but we're back on the weekend with Port Vale. So Nina, just before we wrap up, have you got any final words for our lovely viewers about the model, or tell us what you're doing recently? And let's sign it off with a positive, shall we?
Positives. Let's have a think. Let me have a long think. Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know. To be honest, like, I think a lot of fans have kind of given up on the season and just sort of ready to move on. But then it's like, well, what are you moving on to? I mean, I'm glad there's the World Cup to look forward to. I hope England keep us entertained over the World Cup. Sure. But yeah, to be honest, people say it's still a salvageable season. We still want to try and make a Champions League spot, whether that's going to happen.
Top 6 could be Champions League.
Well, thank goodness for that, because I think that's probably going to be our saving grace.
If Aston Villa win the Europa League and finish in the top 4. So we're actually hoping that Aston Villa have a really good end of the season, because if they do, then 6 places.
Well, there you go. Up the but yeah, no, I don't know. I don't feel very hopeful right now. I can't say I'm particularly looking forward to watching Chelsea play either. So yeah, it just feels like there's too much disarray right now to think. But yeah.
Well, if you can't enjoy watching the football, what you can enjoy is Nina's reactions to it over on her channel, Nina's Chelsea Corner. We're collabed. It's going to be linked in the description. Get over and subscribe. You recently crossed 10k subscribers, didn't you? So massive congratulations for that. Get her on the way to 20. Let's do it. Nina, thank you so much for joining me. It's always a pleasure to have you. And I hope the next time that we get to talk to each other, it's maybe a little bit sunnier on our side of London. But guys, thank you very much for sticking around until the end of the video if you did, and we will catch up with you very, very soon. Take it easy. Peace.